Join you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's no problem. Matthew, can you tell us a little about yourself and background?
Yeah, yeah. I am as I said, a Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate here in North Carolina. I'm a disabled Marine Corps combat veteran. Did time at the State Department as well. Been in the think tank community the last 12 years, been doing primarily anti-war and human rights activism in the and larger foreign policy issues, but also to working here at local levels, particularly in homeless issues. But my experience these last 10, 12 years, whether it been on the streets with groups like Veterans for Peace or Code Pink, or in Congress with my think tank, um, really brought me to this point where trying to do something electorally, I think, is important. And I should say just up front that I don't believe electoralism is the priority, though. That I believe the electoralism, a political party, the politics are just one part of the larger body, of the larger movement. And I feel at this point, this is where I can help the best, is by helping that political side of, a left movement continue to build, continue to grow, in order to enable the constituency of that movement to see some justice for decades of if not centuries, right, of hostile government policies against them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's completely right. We've seen a lot of hostility for, like you said, the past century, and especially for contempt for third parties, and we've seen not only what's going on with you in the ballot, we've seen recently, even in the last presidential election, we saw with Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker getting kicked off of the ballot. In Wisconsin. We've seen it happen in Pennsylvania. So yeah, it is important. I think it's important to, like you said, not solely focus on electoral politics, but we also have that lane there for people who want it, and knowing exactly what you. I like the fact that you mentioned the fact that that's what you think, where you think you can help, because a lot of people think that they have to always just hit the streets, or go do something like directly, like this action right now, which is fine, completely fine. But not everybody can do that. They have to do what they need.
You're back, Z. Can you hear us?
My internet is being wonky lately.
Yeah, but no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, Z. I mean, this idea that we need to focus on one thing. I mean, it's difficult though, right? Because we're up against a Leviathan. And so the idea that we're going to do everything and just run headfirst into the Leviathan and somehow we're going to knock it over is, that we're knock over this massive edifice backed by the corporations, the banks, and the wealthy, the military, the healthcare industry, big agriculture, that we're just going to knock it over by no. But so we have to do things asymmetrically. At the same time, too, we can't cede anything, though. So where our strengths may be in other places, particularly, say, in communication and mutual aid, in civil disobedience and direct action, labor organizing, all these other parts of the body, we still must pursue the other parts as well, including politics. And, eventually, at some point, the other parts get to the point where you get that tipping point, and then the politics actually come into play for us. So yeah, no, it certainly, to make it as I guess as mundane or as simple as possible, it's got to be a team effort, and I see a lot of arguing and bickering over, people will say, well, electoralism is not worth it. And then the counter will be, well, look, we had 25 million people on the streets after George Floyd's death. And what did that do? And there are points and counterpoints to all that. And the reality is that we have to work together, build a strategy on the left, using our strengths, work asymmetrically, find the cracks in the edifice to break apart the system that we're trying to pull down. Right. I mean, and at this point, it requires us doing multiple things, one of those being electoral politics.
Absolutely. So before we go into, the Democrats doing what they can to keep you off the ballot and all of that, one of the things when I was looking on your campaign page that I noticed that really stood out to me was that you mentioned, as someone who was in the Marines, right? I realized that the oligarchs who control the U.S. government have been waging war on working class people and our planet at the same time they were waging endless war abroad. So I'm just curious to hear from you. What was like your aha moment for you where you realized, like, wow, this is what's happening, and this is like, yeah.
I don't think there was like one singular moment. It rather, one of the things I talk about, one, to get back to this idea that waging war on the working class, as they wage war overseas, and how the two are conjoined. And I just had this experience a few weeks ago where I met with saw them speak, and then I was able to talk to them afterwards. Number of people who had come up from Venezuela to speak about what's happening in Venezuela, particularly with the sanctions, as well as the multiple coup attempts against the government down there by the United States. And one of the points that was I clearly saw was that we have sanctions both externally to achieve our results, like say in Venezuela, as well as internally, say as for-profit healthcare, right? This idea that we are killing people because they don't have the money to go to the doctor. I mean, and that's the essence of it. When you look and you see what the National Academy of Science said earlier this month, which previously had been reported by Public Citizen and others, that 1/3 of COVID deaths are caused by a lack of healthcare access, right? This idea that the for-profit industry has killed, the for-profit healthcare industry has killed 1/3 of the 1 million people who have died during the COVID pandemic. And that's on top of the tens of thousands that die every year due to lack of healthcare, or healthcare insurance or access, or however you want to describe it. So this idea that we internally sanction as well as externally sanction in order to make sure everything goes to the top, in order to make sure everything goes to the corporations, to the banks, to the wealthy. I mean, so you see this congruency in policy, both domestically and in foreign policy. But in terms of, I don't know if there was one aha moment. One of the things that I have, as I reflect upon it, though, is I realized that, look, I went to a very good public high school. I went to a very good private college. I did not come out of a working class background at all, But one of the things I realized, really, my introduction to workers was in the Marine Corps, because that's where the vast majority of the recruits come from. And then circumstances in my life these last however many years. But one of the things that I can see, though, is I could come out of a very good public high school and be the history honor student and all that, and never had read Chomsky or Zinn or Malcolm X or Angela Davis, never reading those things until I'm in my 30s, right? And I think that's where the dots start to come in line. I actually if people remember John Perkins, he wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It came out in like 2004. I read that book in 2006, and it's fresh in my mind because I was just introduced to him. And so that was an aha moment, reading his book, and someone who could so clearly because I had studied and I knew about Bretton Woods and the establishment of the post-World War II financial order, and Nixon taking us off the gold exchange in 71. I knew about all those things, but I didn't understand how that practically worked, in the sense, as Perkins would explain, how you have this gangsterism, if you will, this racketeering, this mafia-like approach to the developing world, to the global South, where we basically can hold them up, force them to take our loans, put them into debt, foist corrupt regimes on them, and it just becomes this, money-making operation, where trillions of dollars are extracted from the global South every year through this post-World War II financial framework that can get taught as it is throughout the United States as some type of beneficial, really quite a practical approach to international finance, when in a sense it really is just high-class gangsterism.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, Z, any question you have?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, can you tell us about this? Not because I know we're going to talk about the Democrats, but as far as being a Green candidate in North Carolina, What are some of the, because I'm in South Carolina, so
Okay.
we don't have a lot of Green Party down here at the moment, and I wanted to know what are some of the obstacles that you're facing from like people on the ground, everyday people on the ground.
Well, in terms of everyday folks, we don't really face much opposition. We encounter a lot of enthusiasm. One of the issues is they haven't heard of us because they haven't heard of us, right? Because we don't have the resources to be on their television screens, right? We are shut out of the major national media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, the Washington Post, New York Times, etc. Even local media. It's we're always down at the bottom of the article, and we're mentioned in paragraph 8 out of 9. So when people are made aware of us, though, they are very enthusiastic, and we had that experience in the spring when we were out there petitioning to get on the ballot, and we got 22,500 signatures from people. We talked to tens of thousands of people more, and the enthusiasm for political change was enormous. Because I had people ask me, what are people talking about, when guys are out there, and are they talking about Ukraine, or of course people were talking about inflation, people were talking about housing, but over and over again, the conversation was really just about, we need something different. We need reform. We need to fix this. We need to tear it down and build it over again, however people want to describe it. And I would have people say to me, look, I'm a conservative. You're a socialist. There's no way I'm voting for you. However, you need to be on the ballot. And I think the most partisan, where we saw this in the most in the most partisan setting, was that our last 2 weeks of our petitioning effort coincided with the 2 weeks of early primary voting here in North Carolina, along with primary day. And so we were at the polling places, and people would come out literally 3 or 4 minutes after filling out a primary ballot for the Democrats or Republicans, and they would sign our petition to recognize us as a new party. And when I was there, I had people who, again, literally 3 or 4 minutes before, had just filled out a Republican or Democrat primary ballot, had just put their mark down for a Democratic or Republican senator, and again, minutes later, are saying, look, I'll vote for you in November, to me, for the same thing they had just marked off someone for, because there's that level of discontent. And the real issue is, how do we continue to build on what's been built already? And how do we make sure people recognize that we are here and that we are viable? And I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about, what happened with the state board of elections and with the Democratic Party. But that's one of the things that really, I think, frightened them, is seeing a successful effort like this, seeing that there is the ability to organize and get it done, right? So you're showing that, you can get out there, you can execute. But the other thing, more importantly, is that the folks, the people, they see this, they want this, they need it, and they're in their not just in their polling, but also too in their actions are demonstrating that something different is possible.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and especially the fact that you mentioned that you don't see Green Party on TV, you don't see it in ads, because there's not a lot of resources, and that's one of the tactics that is used against third parties, is the fact that it's out of sight, out of mind, and the fact and if people don't see it, they don't know they have another choice. So.
And that's changing, Z. I mean, that's changing. I mean, the way technology has got. Look, when I started speaking publicly against the wars in 2009, to do this like I'm doing right now with you guys was not an option. You had to go into a studio, or even in 2009, you got in a landline and talked to someone in a studio, right? So just in the last 10 years, the way we've seen media develop, and the ability for folks like you two guys to be doing this, to communicate, to educate, to link people together, right? I mean, I was talking about the body before, and I said this the other day to another set of journalists, but the body of the movement, I really see what you all are doing as being the torso, or at least maybe the brain cortex or something that allows for all the other body parts to communicate, to allow for everyone to be informed, to educate people, to inspire people, right? I really see you all as being, people who are doing what you two are doing, as being central, if not the linchpin, to everything that we're trying to accomplish. And that's remarkably different than it was 10, 12 years ago. And I think the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the establishment, to use that term, understands that, and they're terrified by it.
Yeah, and before I pass it on to Andrew, I wanted to say, yeah, I don't think they would, if you weren't some type of a threat, I don't think they would have went after you at all. And I think more people like just people at their houses should just be taking, like, if they can afford it and they have the time, they should try to get a mic and try to take it in their own hands and have normal people talk and have normal people talking to candidates and normal people talking, making their own media. So I think that you are right. I think that this is just the start, and I hope that it becomes a lot more accessible and widespread than it is right now.
Right, and you see that with the considerable, the literal degradation of the national media in terms of their share of how many people they reach, in terms of their profits, right? I mean, in terms of their continuing to have to go to smaller and smaller markets, identity type markets, right, in order to be profitable, like to find a niche, because people are tuning them out. I mean, I think the examples of like how Fox and MSNBC operate, where it's the Tucker Carlsons or the Rachel Maddows who bring in their money, because that applies to a very small segment of the population that is terrified of the proverbial other. And, if you ever watch that stuff, that's in MSNBC and Fox programming, the two that are profitable, right, as opposed to, say, CNN or the others, or the flagship newspapers, that approach makes them profitable. That fear mongering, the anger, and that's where the Democrat and Republican parties go towards. 40 to 50% of Democrats say Republicans are evil. A like number of Republicans say that about Democrats. And that's a result of the two-party structure. That's the continuing devolvement of an identity politics, red versus blue, type of structure, that the best way for them to win is to make their people afraid of the other. And so January 6th is the outcome of that. And we will have more January 6th or worse, or, and certainly other things too, less exciting or dramatic as that, but certainly as nefarious, due to the nature of the two-party structure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, going off a little bit of what you're saying, these two parties, they almost rely on the horridness of each other so that then they could just say, at least we're not like them, right? And that is not at all, way to shoot for the stars there.
Right. And exactly. And that's why, our argument, and I think you guys and probably most of the folks who are watching us agree in this idea of, like, we need a multi-party democracy. First of all, anytime I think we talk about democracy in the U.S., it needs to be understood that we're putting quotes around that word, right? Because that's a whole history. But I think everyone understands what I'm saying. But this idea that we need to, if we're trying to go that route, it needs to be an issues-based, beliefs-based, philosophies-based, voting on your conscience and your principles and values, as opposed to doing this a lesser of two evils, getting into the ballot box, going to the ballot box and pretending you're a Fox News pundit or an MSNBC news pundit, and figuring out which is, strategically, because what you're doing is you're compromising your vote, and you're voting for a compromised candidate. And why do you have any expectation that what's going to happen is going to be anything that's going to reflect who you, your family, your neighbors, whoever need, if that's the method you're voting in? And so that's, I think, one of the strongest arguments for going towards a multi-party democracy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so one of the things, as I was kind of looking into your case, that I found interesting is that apparently the Green Party was last recognized as a party in North Carolina in 2020, but failed to garner the 2% of vote, I guess, in the pre-2020 election. And so it lost its official status, and now it's trying to reclaim their recognition, right? And so this brings now to your campaign in 2022. So it sounds like you collected 22,000 raw signatures, and then more than 15,000 of them were deemed as valid signatures, which is a little over 2,000 more than the minimum of what you need, right? It's like 13,000 something. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I guess you have to also have 200 registered voters sign from each of the 3 North Carolina congressional districts. I guess to make sure that you're not just in like a hyper localized area getting people, right? And so soon after, so this gets back to sort of what a lot of the big thing and the major reason why you're on here now, right? So soon after the signatures were submitted, this Elias Law Group, which has been found to be a common Democratic law group for the Democrats, basically claimed that a lot of the signatures were fraudulent. And so I'm just going to pull up real quick some of the claims that they are making, screenshot, just so, because I think it's good to address the specific claims and then good to have you respond to them as well.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. Yeah, yeah, because it's completely specious. You see it and you're like, oh, really? And then it's like they're talking about 1 out of 22,521 signatures we put in. They're talking about 1. And then because there's 2 of these over here, now they say there's numerous, right? That really, I feel like I should be doing like a George Carlin bit about this, right? Where like he talks about words and semantics and everything, where there's numerous, and how ominous that sounds and everything, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So this is, all right. So Jacqueline Lopez, I guess, put this together. And then she is the lawyer for the Elias Law Group. And so just going to read a little bit to this. This is to the board, right? I write to raise concern about the sufficiency of information provided to signers of the North Carolina Green Party's petition to qualify as a political party under state law. As you know, the board is responsible for determining the petitions under North Carolina law. In addition to complying with the statutory prescribed form of the petition, petition circulators are required to inform the signers of the general purpose and intent of the new party. As discussed further below, not only did the Green Party fail to comply with this mandatory directive, it's intentionally instructed circulators to conceal its platform, and numerous signatures now declare under penalty of perjury that they were misled. And I look forward to in a little bit talking about the methods that they tried to get some of these people to confess, right? But the main claims under the bullet point that they're making is they're claiming that when voters were given the opportunity to sign the petition, the Green Party wasn't led with their green ideology. And they were told to don't lead with ideology, avoid ideology if possible. We don't have to say exactly what we have in mind. So these instructions suggest that not only the Green Party failed to inform the signers of the general purpose and intent of the new party, other than to be recognized as a political party, but the Green Party intentionally instructed circulators to conceal its platform. And so they're saying the script is not only evidence of the Green Party's obfuscation, a growing number of signatories to the petition not swear under penalty of perjury that they were misled by the party's signature gatherers about the petition's purpose, right? And so you get the idea here. And then this is, I guess, what they had a lot of the people who are they trying to get to unsign, sign and agree to, right? That they're a registered voter. They were not informed the petition was for the purpose of the qualified Green Party, right? The representatives presented with, so a lot of claims here being made. So wanted to give you a chance just to respond to that, those statements that Elias Law Center basically presented to the board.
Yeah, it's complete nonsense. And I think their total number of people, and we'll get into how they misled people. And it really is quite, it's almost comical how they're accusing us of fraud when they clearly, and we have this documented, used fraud themselves to get people to agree to what they were saying. I mean, it's really if it's over the top. This is all pretty absurd. I think they got a total of 18 people to sign something saying that out of 22,500. I mean, so numerous, right? This idea that we were concealing who we are, misleading people is total BS. Here's the petition sheet. And it says right up, the undersigned qualified registered voters in county hereby petition for the formation of a new political party be named North Carolina Green Party and whose state chairman is. I mean, it says right on the petition.
That's what it's literally staring at them
it's really
as they're
right on
it.
there. I mean, here's an example of we had all kinds of literature, we had all kinds of banners. We always had our t-shirts on, our hats, we're giving people pins, I mean, I had my campaign literature, I mean, look, we had signs that said stuff like this, right? I mean, this is also not only my desk where I do these Zoom type things, it's also kind of our storage room right now. But here's a piece, here's a sign that we would have, and certainly we were pushing ending the war on drugs as a major part, because it is a major part of our policy. Just as if you were to receive a text message from an advertisement from Sherry Beasley, who's the Democrat for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. She would lead with, we have to protect abortion, or if you get something from Ted Budd, the Republican, you're going to be he's going to say, we have to protect gun rights. I mean, it's this idea that somehow political parties and candidates are out there not using issues as ways to draw in or speak to voters is just really, I don't understand how they think that logic would fly, but also too, everything we have was clearly labeled. If you can see it there, it says NC Green Party, I mean, and then it says the Green Party calls for the legalization of drugs and treating drug abuse as a medical issue. You mean and that was for everything. And the way we trained our people, you saw the what we have for tips. They extracted key phrases. So what it reminds me of is if you ever see a review for a movie and the movie just sucks, right? And then you see something where there's a poster for the film and it says there's a quote from the review, right? And the quote from the review says something like, "This movie is smashing," Siskel and Ebert. And the reality was what they actually said was, "This movie is a smashing piece of shit," right? But they left off. I mean, that's literally what they did. And people can go online. They're still up there, the petition scripts and everything else. The literal script says, and this is how I would do it. I would, excuse me, do you have a moment to sign our petition to help us get on the ballot? We're trying, I'm with the Green Party and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you would use a pitch this would help us legalize marijuana and end the war on drugs. I mean, and that was the bit that oftentimes will get people because that's what they're into, and same thing too. Like I said, with abortion or gun rights or any issue, that's what people are, and that's what you talk to them about. So this idea that somehow we were out there not representing ourselves is complete nonsense. It just really is. If it wasn't such an issue for us, it would be just something so easy to laugh off and ignore. But this is Elias Law Firm. This is Mark Elias's law firm. People aren't familiar with Mark Elias. He is arguably the most prominent attorney in the Democratic Party. He has been general counsel for John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris. His law firm is incredibly powerful. Like I said, if you're not familiar, just Google him, look at Mark Elias's Wikipedia page, and you'll see who this person is. And the fact that they brought Elias Law Firm down from D.C. right away shows how scared they were of the campaign and the idea of having a Green Party presence in North Carolina. But, it's more than that. It's one, the idea that our people went out there and did this. That's what scares them. And then the other is the idea of having an option on the ballot for people to vote for healthcare, to vote for affordable housing, to vote for living wages, things that are a real danger to the Democratic and Republican parties' major donors. So, the threat is not me or the Green Party per se. It's the threat of the people that our place on the ballot represents to the big donors of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and I found it kind of interesting. So, the Board of Elections, it was voted 3-2 to not have you on the ballot. 3 Democrats voted yes, 2 Republicans voted no. And I was seeing that Tommy Tucker, who I think is one of the people on the board, Republican, even made a comment saying along the lines of, I'm just confused as to why so much scrutiny is going into all these signatures, where literally in 2020, nobody looked at any of the signatures. It just was kind of rolled through.
Right. And we just had confirmation on this from the chair of the Libertarian Party here in North Carolina. He's been with the Libertarians for 30 years. He said he's been involved in 8 petition drives. And he says never once has the state board of elections ever looked at the signatures that were verified by the counties before. I mean, so it really is. This is something where they're zeroing in on us. They specifically do not want us on the ballot, again, because of who we represent and the danger that is to their donors. But no, it is very clear that this is completely out of line, out of standard, is not anything that they could say, oh, hey, we always do this. This is no. And the way the state statute is written, in the way it works is, so we collected, just to go back over this again, we collected more than 22,500 signatures. We turned signatures into 96 out of 100 of North Carolina's counties. Those county boards of elections verified almost 16,000 signatures, 15,953. And we had needed 13,865 verified signatures, which gives us almost 2,100 more than we needed. We met all the deadlines, and then we turned them in to the state by June 1st. The state then has 30 days to certify us. And the statute reads that the state, upon receipt of these signatures, will immediately and forthwith certify, because the counties had already validated, right? So there's no right. I mean, and so the issue that the state says is, well, there are irregularities. Well, anyone who knows anything about petitioning knows that you're always going to have petition signatures thrown out. It's the way it works. And rule of thumb is, for every 4 you collect, only 3 will count. Maybe it's 70% verification rate, maybe less than that. But so you're always trying to go for more than what is required, because that's just the way it works. Because people put down the wrong address, they think they're registered, they're not. And then, of course, you're going to have challenges from those who don't want you on the ballot. And I think the best example is that, if people had seen the Netflix film Bring Down This House, when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez goes in with her signatures, and she needed like 2,000, she brought in 7,000 or something like that. And you see that, there's this great scene where, as she's leaving the Board of Elections, the Democratic Party lawyers, the DNC lawyers, are going in to challenge those signatures she just dropped off. And this is one of the things that we'll get to about what Elias was doing, contacting people. But so anyway, the State Board of Elections receives the signatures June 1st. They have, by statute, until July 1st to certify it. They take the full 30 days. They point to us about 200 irregularities, so less than 1% of what we turned in. None of the irregularities they point to were validated or verified as signatures that counted towards our goal. So the whole thing is moot. The counties had already recognized these as not being valid signatures. They take 30 days to investigate. We fully cooperate with it. And then on the very last possible day before the July 1st deadline to be certified, they hold a certification hearing. Now, just to kind of underscore how this was all done in such bad faith, after we're certified by the State Board of Elections, we have to have a nominating convention. Then our people, we get certified, and then our folks have to get registered as Greens, right? So you got to go to the county boards of election and register as a Green Party person. Then we have a nominating convention, and then our candidates have to go and file for candidacy. So the State Board of Elections holds a certification hearing on June 30th, and by July 1st, we have to accomplish all of that, right? So you see right off the bat, there was never any good faith in this, right? And this comes to the crux of what the State Board of Elections argument is, or the Democrats on the State Board of Elections, because the Republicans supported us. And don't get me wrong, I know if we were a conservative party, it would have been the other way around. So, but what their argument is that since there were irregularities, there could be more irregularities, right? So even though the counties had identified these 200 irregular signatures to us 30 days, and we found nothing else, there could be more. And because there could be more, we need more time to investigate. But because tomorrow's the deadline, we don't have time to investigate. So we are not going to certify you. And that was it. We were done. I mean, that was it. And when our attorney tried to when our attorney tried to ask a question about this, hey, does any of what you're talking about pertain to the verified signature count? They refused to answer. And when he tried to follow up, the chair of the board shouted him down and muted his microphone. And that was the extent of the due process we received in a brazenly partisan hearing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Z.
That and that's, like you said, that's not unheard of. Unfortunately.
Right. I think it surprised
people.
We
see that. I'm sorry. I was going to say, because usually we see that with like you said, like you see it within the party itself, but then this going out of their way to like, it's like if third parties aren't, if it's like wasting your vote, and it's like supposedly and like not supposed to be a threat, then why are you going out of your way to just like take like to do this? There wouldn't be a reason.
That's exactly right. They prove our point, right? And they prove your guys' point and the folks watching this and everything else over and over again. One, by the way they act, they prove that the two-party system is exclusionary, it's undemocratic, and it's corrupt. And then they also show that obviously we're not a wasted vote if they want to keep us off the ballot so bad.
Yeah, definitely. So going off of, because I think it's important to also recognize some of the ways that the Elias Law Group, right, was trying to get people to confess to being like, I didn't really sign it, or I did this, right? You actually got a text message yourself pushing you to rebuke your own signature on your own petition, to get you on the ballot. So say a little bit more regarding that process and what it was like for that to happen.
Yeah, so just to kind of give the context to it. So in addition, in a parallel fashion, adjacent to all this with the State Board of Elections, because what Elias did really didn't come into play at all in the State Board of Election decision. And what my understanding is, I believe, is that they're holding that to use against us later. So if we challenge the State Board of Elections, or I should say when we challenge the State Board of Elections decision and we win, then Elias will come in to challenge us with their stuff, to delay the process, right? To cause us to exhaust ourselves, use up all our money, all people's time, et cetera, and eventually get to the point where the ballots have already been printed and this is, overcome by events. But about 3 weeks ago or so, we became aware that Elias Law Firm was down here and they had received our petitions through a public records request. Then about 2 weeks ago, we started hearing from people saying, hey, someone called me and asked me to take my name off the petition. And we said, what? Who? And then we started hearing from people saying, someone called me and they said they were the Green Party calling to ask me to have my name off petition. And we said, okay. And so then, and people started giving us information. We started seeing the same numbers coming up. They were calling me, but for whatever reason, whenever I tried to answer the auto dialer, it didn't work. It would just, so I could never get them on the phone. But one day, it was a Saturday. So it's just about 2 weeks ago, I get a text message. And it's this from, the Elias Law Firm on behalf of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, asking me, it's under the guise of, I think this is how they got the petitions. It's under the guise of, that we want to confirm the integrity of the petitioning process. So we're going to go and reach out to people and make sure they did sign it. And then, of course, then they go into a whole spiel about why you should remove your name because Greens help Republicans, abortion is in the ballots. You don't want to be the one who causes abortion to be lost because you signed this petition for the Greens, and then they started showing up at people's homes. Even people who had said to them, no, I want my name to remain on the petition, they showed up at their homes. And we also have reports that they said that they were the state board of elections. So at times they would confirm they were with the Democratic Party. Other times they would say they're a Green Party. Sometimes supposedly they said they were a state board of elections. Other times they refused to say who they were. And we have the Green Party and the refusal on audio or whatever. But like the misleading, the deliberate misleading, the lying, was calculated to get people to remove their names. And again, at 22,500 signatures, this was successful in about 140 cases, I think. So even if they were to take those names off, it still has almost no impact at all on our attaining the goal, meeting the threshold required to be on the ballot.
And but the people who voted yes to get you off the ballot used that as the reasoning to do that because there was found like 145 people recounting and going against it. That was the main reason. If you were to talk,
no, the main that really didn't come into play at all during the State Board of Elections hearing. And again, I think they're going to hold on and try and use that later.
Yeah,
and I think they're out there trying now to get more people to take their names off the ballot and harassing them. I mean, they were calling people 5 or 6 times, and now because the state says that we are underneath a fraud investigation, and at alternate times they say we're under criminal investigation. Mm-hmm. I imagine Elias is out there saying, look, this is a criminal thing. These guys do you really want your name on that as a part of that? Right. So they're doing that to try and get more people off. But really the argument the State Board of Elections used for not certifying was that because there were these irregularities, again, we knew about, they told us about 200, but that never counted for our verified signatures. Right. That because there were those, well, there could be more then. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, that's their reasoning. That's the train of thought, the logic they're pursuing. Yeah. And because even though we've had your signatures for 30 days and not found anything, there could be more. I mean, the danger this sets up, because this is why it's so brazen, is because it allows for really any excuse. I mean, what's the difference between this saying that there could be fraud and showing no evidence of it, and then denying us to be on the ballot? Right. And what Trump and his people are saying about the elections being, what's the difference? I mean, Giuliani was in court saying there was fraud, and they say, show the evidence. Well, it could be there. We can't show you it right now. We need more. I mean, like it's the same type of argument being used. And this idea that because there are irregularities in the petitioning process, which by definition, again, you must always have a 70 or 75% verification rate, meaning 25 or 30% of your signatures are not valid. By that measure, then no petition effort could ever be successful, because the standards they're using here could mean that because someone put the wrong address down, that throws the entire petition process into question. Because if that person did it, well, more people could have done it. Right. I mean, so the reasoning and the rationale is really dangerous. And I think that's why what's happening here is of national significance. And, that's why I'm grateful for the attention you guys are giving us.
Well, speaking, you can go ahead and go to that while I was going to ask this question. And
I wanted to show this is the text response.
We're talking about North Carolina and speaking of fraudulent and national elections at stake, what are your thoughts on Moore versus Harper?
I'm sorry.
What are your thoughts on Moore versus Harper, the Supreme Court case?
Okay. The case in the sense of whether or not the judiciary has the right to review what the state legislature does when it comes to elections. And this idea, I guess it gets to this really kind of like sacrosanct belief within these conservative circles that really, I guess, gets states' rights, right? I mean, it's like we're relitigating this from centuries ago. And this is dangerous when people come into power who have these beliefs that exist only in their own minds, the validity of them. And I think, if people haven't seen the movie Vice about Dick Cheney, where Christian Bale plays, it's an excellent film, and I'm recommending it because that gets into like this small cabal that was part of Cheney's circle, but particularly his legal people, their legal beliefs, their own understanding of our Constitution and in our system is what drives them to justify all types of things, right? All that Cheney, one of the things the film points out is that they believe that since Cheney is the vice president and he is in both the executive and by being president of the Senate legislative branches, then no one has any authority over him. That the vice president right? I mean, this crazy thing that in 250 years, no one has ever said before here. And what does that lead to? That leads to the Iraq war. That leads to torture. That leads to warrantless wiretaps. I mean, that leads to this border policy which crime against humanity that people are still suffering and dying under, I mean, as well as a host of other things too, right? I mean, so this notion that with Harper Moore, that you would have state legislatures basically able to run elections however they see fit, determine the results of those elections as they see fit, without any review from. I mean, it just runs counter to the whole idea of checks and balances. I mean, the whole idea of why this three blocks of power were set up to try and. And we can argue about whether that was the merits of that or certainly how effective it's been, but the idea of it. So it's very dangerous. And I think there is, people are right to say it is a form of judicial coup. But that's what the Republicans have been incredibly successful at the last 40 or 50 years, and I mean, you got to give them credit for being the evil geniuses that they are. I mean, it's loathsome, it's disgusting. I mean, they're heinous, but they have been very effective at achieving what they want to achieve. They put a strategy in place, this Federalist Society strategy 40 years ago or so now, and they have pursued it, and they financed it, they resourced it, they got the state legislators they need into power, they got the judges on the benches that they need in power, they got the plaintiffs that they needed, or they got the legislation put out there in order to get cases into court. I mean, everything has moved according to a plan. Exactly. And the idea that the Democratic Party and others have just, fallen, gone with the vote harder type of, as well as the cynical, this is a good fundraising strategy for us as well, has got to this point where, rights are being lost. People are really suffering. And I look at Harper and I say, this is dangerous for a host of reasons, but just like Dobbs is dangerous and potentially others that are coming, in the sense that by bringing it back to the states, we've already got a divided society, this blue-red society. That my fear, say with Dobbs, is that people in California and New York are not going to lose their abortion access. And they know that. And if my fear is that the complacency that can settle in for that, of we're okay here in New York, sucks for those in Alabama and Texas, but we're okay here in LA. And like
already
that,
see that.
Yeah. And I really worries me because this is, but I think this is what comes back to being on the left, this idea of universality, right? This fundamental idea of human rights are human rights. And it doesn't matter if you live in Alabama or you live in Massachusetts, those rights are rights. And so, but I'm afraid that the practical effects of Dobbs and the whole Alito type of his beliefs will create this really two-tiered system here in the U.S. where if you've got the money, you can afford to live in California or New York or Massachusetts or wherever, you're going to be okay, and if you can move. If you got money, you can move from Mississippi to those places. But if you don't, well, that's too bad. You're stuck there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's important that you pointed out is the fact that, it's not just going to be Republicans using that, because in red states there's going to stay solidly red, and blue states are going to stay solidly blue. because each state has their, like you said, their team. They would have their team. So
yeah, exactly. And that's the look. If the Republicans and Democrats can get this down to that the only people allowed to vote are people who have subscriptions to Fox News and MSNBC, they'd be overjoyed. I mean, that's what they want. I mean, they just want this continuing narrow identity politics, red versus blue. Yeah, I don't even think it's gotten to the point where many people in the two corporate parties can't even articulate what their values or principles are, because both parties constantly override that. Both parties. I mean, it's like talking to a Republican who's in favor of smaller government, or free markets, and then you explain to them, do you know how much money the Republican Party gives to corporations every year through subsidies? I mean, like it's
about
madness.
Regulation.
I'm sorry.
About regulation or deregulation.
Oh, any of that stuff, right? Exactly. I mean, the same with Democrats. I mean, the same with the idea that they somehow are a party for workers, or somehow a party for the environment, or somehow a party concerned about, I mean, just the abortion issue. I mean, you just saw Joe Biden put a pro-life judge on the bench. Of course, I think the best example was the way that the Democratic Party so warmly supported Henry Cuellar in his primary race, even after Dobbs had just been announced. I mean, like, no shame, but you see it works, though, because you look and you see what the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee said, the DSCC. Their two best days of fundraising ever came the day of Dobbs and the day after Dobbs. So this is good for business, I mean, and to hell with, what it actually means for your constituents, as long as the money's coming.
Yeah. I think, I'm sure, Ed, when you decided to run, you expected that you would get resistance, particularly from the Democrats, because there's a lot of historical precedent that has suggested that. Did you expect they would use the tactics that they used against you? And going through what you've gone through, what would be some of your suggestions of how to overcome some of those tactics they use in future third party, Green Party candidates that decide to run?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. We did expect not the brazenness of this, and certainly not the overtly partisan and very public corruption of the State Board of Elections. And that's not shocking to me. I mean, I've talked to people who've been in politics for 20, 30 years who said they've never seen anything like it. I mean, as soon as the State Board of Elections made their decision, I had a journalist call me who's been covering politics for more than 20 years down here. And he said, I've never seen anything like that. My head is spinning. I mean, so it wasn't just, so I think that surprised us. What we were kind of expecting was that they were going to make sure every T was crossed, every I was dotted, so, this person misspelled the name of their street. Or we can't really tell if that's a 7 or a 1, like that type of stuff. And that may still be coming. That may still be coming. And I
have terrible handwriting, so they'd get me for that if I was.
Well, the other thing too is that, like, people are signing a clipboard, right? So there's one hand's here and one hand's here. Yeah. And then we were at a lot of festivals and food truck events and concerts and things like that. So people, they've got a big gulp in one hand, and they're trying to sign it, right? I mean, like, so it's kind of, I mean, so we were expecting certain kind of what we had seen before. We weren't expecting this, and we certainly weren't seeing the degree of deception and lying that occurred so openly. And this gets back to the arrogance of power, though, right? The idea, and there was a smugness throughout that State Board of Elections hearing from the chair of the State Board of Elections, who's a Democrat. This attitude of, like, we don't like this, so this is what we're going to do. And what are you going to do about it? I mean, there was that smugness that was present the entire time. And again, the arrogance of power. I would say, looking back, certainly going into this, I'm not sure what we could have done to protect us from accusations that we were out there misrepresenting ourselves or hiding who we were, because we weren't. And I mean, so and then the idea that we were conducting fraud because we weren't. I would say that what I would recommend to people is to do exactly that. Be as transparent as possible, be as overt in your operation as possible. And then the other aspects is, have your record keeping, and that's what we have. We were able to turn our things over to the State Board of Elections. And, so it's that level of detail, but just the understanding that this is going to happen, and be prepared, and have your people prepared for it, and have that good sense of communication going throughout your organization continually. 95% of our effort was our people, was Green Party members, members of the campaign, socialists, leftists, independents. That's who 95% of our effort was. And we had a small part that were contractors that we brought in towards the end, just to make sure we had that cushion, right? Because we knew we were going to have to have a cushion over what we needed. So we brought some folks in the end to help us. And I mean, but just that degree of communication, that degree of openness, making sure everybody is because what happens is you have this arduous process up front where you're collecting the signatures, and that exhausts you, and your entire campaign is focused still strictly on that. You're not doing anything else but collecting signatures. And then particularly as a grassroots campaign, you don't have that many resources. You don't have that many people. And then when you turn them in and you think that, okay, now we can start campaigning, this is all done. Well, it's been 45 days since we met the deadline to turn our signatures into the counties, and we're still dealing with ballot access. And now we have this in front of us for the foreseeable future. And it just doesn't allow us to campaign as we want to campaign. The narrative is completely controlled by this, right? I'm not able to get out there and talk about housing. I'm not able to get out there and talk about wages or any of those kinds of things, ending the war on drugs. What I have to talk about is, hey, Matt, when did you guys stop committing fraud? I mean, like that's what I have to. I mean, so the narrative is completely controlled by this process, which is part of the design. And then what that does is exhausts your money, your people, your time, your effort, and it causes stress, puts tension on the organization. So I would just say that I think going into it, being aware and having a plan to deal with that, and not thinking, okay, once we get on ballot access, we can do all these other things. No, you have to have all the other things in place and functioning before you even begin the ballot access, because once the ballot access starts, the nature of it, it's going to consume you, but then also too, the opposition, the adversary that you're going to encounter is going to be such that it's going to consume you as well. So I think that would be my thing is just have everything in place, and don't think you can do this after ballot access or during ballot access. Have all what you need in place before you start it, because once you're in it, it's going to consume you, and then they're going to do everything they can as a matter of design to keep you sucked in that so that you're not campaigning. And that's something actually that one of the board members, the Republican board members, said in the hearing, like, look, this is unfair. For 45 days, they've not been able to campaign because you've been holding their signatures. And it's absolutely correct.
Yeah. Great advice in terms of, though, like really keeping track of everything, records, and from the start.
Yeah. Right. Have all your systems in place. This nonsense about we're going to build the airplane in flight or any of that crap. No, absolutely not. That's because what happens is there's always going to be a fire to put out. Something's always going to happen. You have to take this with the seriousness that you would do anything else. The idea, you wouldn't show up on a job site and then figure out what your bill of material is then. Figure out how many nails you need after you get to the job site.
Right.
I mean, like it's the same type of phenomenon. Yeah. So, but that's one of the things I say about as we build this, as we continue to build. And I think, Z, you were talking about this, that the presence of third parties in South Carolina, and the same here in North Carolina, as we build this, it's just not about finding people to run as candidates. It's about finding people who will be treasurers and training them, right? I mean, the financial stuff is something that keeps parties out, keeps independent candidates out, keeps grassroots campaigns down, because it's all so obtuse and purposely vague. That I meet people who run who they say, I'm not going to raise more than, if they're running federal, I'm not going to raise more than $5,000 because if I raise more than $5,000, then I've got to do all my reporting to the FEC, and I don't have anyone to do that for me. And if you do it wrong, you're going to get in trouble, and you will get in trouble. They will punish you as running as an independent or as third party. They will. I mean, we see that happen. I mean, so you got to find people out there who can do that work, who can be the treasurer. Same thing too, having people who can run campaigns at whatever level. Right? Be a campaign manager, have that experience, and then there's other things too. You need the media people, you need all the different things, volunteer coordinators, all the different roles that need to be filled in these campaigns. We have to train them. We have to look for people and train them just as we do with candidates. Because otherwise you're not going to have an effective campaign that reaches people if you don't have a campaign that's resourced and able to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Z?
Oh, I was going to say, so I think I'm coming up a little bit on time, but what I wanted to do was to ask you, you're coming up to us, you're convincing us as people who aren't green or vote third party or socialist or anything like that. What's the pitch?
Oh, that's one of the things, honestly, man, like spend the last couple of weeks talking only about this, you end up forgetting what you're supposed to say when people ask you questions like that, because you don't, it really is a very effective strategy to derail a campaign, is to keep them focused on this, because again, all the effort and time, everything. So, but no, so it gets to the point where like I hear a question like that and I'm surprised. Well, oh, okay. Hey, let me shift back into,
right? Because it really does take up all the energy.
It does. And like you get to the point where like, oh, I haven't answered a question about climate in 2 weeks, and what was that stat I was throwing out for a while, but no, so yeah, look, if you believe the two-party system is corrupt, it's exclusionary, it's undemocratic, if you look at it and you say, look, both parties have been responsible for domestic and foreign policy that has been ruinous, murderous for tens of millions of people, right? If you agree with that, why continue to contribute to the two-party system? Why continue to take part in something that is fundamentally corrupt, is undemocratic, is broken, however you want to describe it? And the idea that somehow, I just saw someone quote about this in a news story who said, but the Green Party is not going to change things overnight. And exactly. But this idea that somehow the political system is going to change on its own without people doing it, without organizing and building and doing it, is just lunacy. We have to build this. We have to continue. And people have been doing this for a long time, and it's going to take a long time. People have been coming together, and we have to continue to do that. Right. This idea that somehow it's just going to, a new political system is just going to grow out of the ground like weeds is just, I don't know why people think that. I hear this about ranked choice voting. Well, I'll vote third party when we get ranked choice voting. Well, how are we going to get ranked choice voting? You think the Democrats and Republicans are just going to give that to us because we want it? They're not giving us health care. They're not giving us affordable housing. They're not giving us action on the climate. They're not giving us, right? Why are they then going to give the thing that might actually jeopardize their power? And let alone proportional representation, getting money out of politics, all those other things. So the idea basically is that if you want this, then you have to take part and help do it. And it's going to take time. Eventually it will happen faster than you think it will. There'll be a tipping point. But yeah, this is the structure that we have to build. And so to do that, we need participation. If you think the two-party system is corrupt, undemocratic, harmful, whatever, then why continue to contribute to it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, like Z said, we are approaching on time. So any other information you would like to leave us with and such, and any other things that you were hoping to bring up that we didn't get to through asking questions?
Yeah, no, if people are interested in the campaign website's MatthewHoh4Senate.org, last name spelled H-O-H. Please go there. Issues are listed there. You can find us on Twitter at Matthew P. Hoh, P as in Patrick. Please follow there. And we're on Facebook as well and Instagram. And if you agree with what I'm saying, this idea that it's not going to change unless we change it, unless we put pressure on the system, unless we disrupt the system. And that's something that I take on, this idea of being a disruptor. Not a spoiler, but a disruptor. Then unless we disrupt the system, make it so uncomfortable that it must change, then please support us. We're in this David versus Goliath fight. We are taking on the Democratic Party machine. There's no one bigger than Mark Elias. There's no one in the bullpen past his law firm for the Democrats. They sent their biggest and baddest down here right away. At the same time we're taking on Elias, we're also taking on the state of North Carolina. And so we've got a two-front battle going on. If you agree with what we're saying, if you're sympathetic to our cause, if you're part of this movement, please help us. Please donate. MatthewHoh4Senate.org, and please encourage others to donate because, yeah, I want to get money out of politics, and it makes me sick to ask for money. But this is the unfortunate reality that we're in, that we're coming up on a huge legal battle that will have national consequences, and we're up against, again, Leviathan here, and we need your support.
Awesome. Thank
you. Yeah, everyone can look down in the under the video and in the description box. There is links to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Links in the description box as well for you all. So there's Z. You're back. Sorry about that. Internet. This is why we need public internet.
That's right. One of our, yeah, I mean, like when people, when people talk about like, well, how can I get this? What's different from you and Democrats? Like a lot of things, many things, but our philosophies, that things that are public utilities like internet. And if you don't understand why the internet is a public utility that after the last 2.5 years, I don't know what to tell you, I mean, like, right. I mean, like, but we believe that should be accessible to all.
Yeah.
And it's a cost that's shared by all and should be accessible to all, not something that corporations should profit off of. And when you understand that, you understand our philosophy and you see how radically different we are than the Democratic Party, just as libertarians are radically different from the Republican Party. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, Matthew, the door's always open if you want to come on, talk and talk more about campaign stuff or just socialist topics in general. The door's always open.
All right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Please support these guys. Like I was saying earlier, this type of work is really the linchpin, as far as I'm concerned, for our movement here. If we don't have folks like Z and Andrew, we don't communicate, we don't coordinate, we don't educate. And if we don't have that, then all those other pieces of the body just fly off. And we need to work as an organized movement, right? And this is how we do it, through people like Z and Andrew. So please support them as well. But yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. You all have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Okay.
You too.
Yep. Bye.
All right. Well, Andrew, I guess we'll head out, but what are you thinking? You want to return a little bit later, or you just want to call it a day?
We could return a little later and talk about a couple things.
All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll probably get some topics up later, and we'll come back to it. It's still a little early, but everybody, thanks for joining us.
Sounds
and
good.
Watching PVN.
It is a little early.
Yeah, it's still a little early. But everyone, and enjoy the rest of the morning, and hopefully we'll be back to discuss some topics in a little bit.
For sure. Peace.